Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I have another great guest on because one of the very essential parts of your business is marketing. No matter what anyone tells you, no matter what your accountant tells you, what your lawyer tells you, marketing is a very, very essential part of your business. And if you don't have an effective strategy, I will tell you your business will struggle. So today we have on a great B2B marketer. I was a guest on his podcast some time before, and I really liked the things that he was saying, really liked the insights that he was sharing. So he's going to be on today talking about marketing for businesses. And he's also going to tell us a little bit about his show as well. So stay tuned for today's episode. So without further ado, let me bring on my guest, Winston. Welcome to the show.
Hey Terrell, thanks for having me. Great being here.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. It has been a pleasure, and I'm sure many things have transpired on your end since we last spoke. So I'm definitely excited to jump into that. But before we do, can you tell, the audience that does not know you, tell us a little bit about your background?
Right, so my background is really in marketing, as you mentioned, Terrell. Spent about 15 years now. Started in that was what probably 2007, I believe. Yeah, so about 15 years. Also spent 12 years in sales. So started out in the media space where the marketing aspect is concerned. Then transitioned to a bit of sales, doing B2B sales in a tech startup. And also, because I have a knack for marketing, I love marketing. I started executing marketing for them as well. So that title changed from just being a sales rep to a marketing and sales rep, and then eventually marketing manager. Left there and been doing a bit of freelance. Then ended up back in another sales role as a sales manager, where I managed a team of close to 1,000 people in about three different continents for that company. Spent about 6 years there and just decided to jump right back into my love for marketing, working at another B2B tech company, where I pretty much transitioned or moved up that ladder to become the director of marketing and sales, business development, really, until I left and decided to do freelancing and then transition from that to where I'm right now to owning my own agency.
Nice, nice. I love it. One of the things that I find to be very interesting is as people talk about, sales, you have marketing, you have business development, what some of the differences, or are they kind of one and the same in your perspective?
Yeah, that's a very good question. They are not one and the same because oftentimes you'll have companies when they're hiring for a particular role, they want to try and fit marketing and sales into one, which that's not the case. I would say that they are, they can stand on their own, but they also work best together in terms of a more collaborative approach. So marketing, it's more along the lines of, I guess you could call it a long-term strategy in a sense of, how do we build that brand, that affinity in the market, and that equity, building that brand authority to being the person or being the brand where companies think of you whenever they have a specific problem or need a particular product that you offer. Where sales, it's more direct. It's more, how can we drive immediate sales? How can we, close that deal within the next 30 days or within the next 90 days? So I would say the primary difference is based on approach. One, it's more long term, building up, leading up to that sale, where sales is more of a short term, how can we get immediate results today?
Gotcha. Now, I guess for yourself, I mean, moving between, marketing, sales, kind of business development, was it a big shift for you to kind of, adjust the way you were thinking about approaching your job as you move between those different departments?
That's a really great question, and something that I hadn't thought about before. But I would say for me, it wasn't a major shift per se. Not because I really thought about it in that moment, but when you're working with startups, you tend to wear many hats. So it was just a case of, listen. I came into the marketing, but they don't have a salesperson because the CEO at the time was really the one doing sales. I had experience with sales. I'm like, listen, don't worry about it. I'll take on that role. So it kind of, I was kind of, I would say, phased into that role without really thinking about it, because at the end of the day, it was just, what do we need to do to get the job done? What do we need to do to really get the results that we're after? And so, but the thing about it is that I actually, I'm glad I had that experience, because it's helped me know where, whether I'm working with my own business or working with clients, it helps me to kind of see that entire perspective in terms of, whether you want to consider the entire sales process or the entire buyer's journey. Different people use different terms, but how to see that full, entire and whole process, and how it actually works, and how both roles work together to actually drive business outcomes.
Awesome. Now, in your experience with meeting, like, marketers, do you find that many marketers truly understand that sales and buying process?
To be honest, no, they do not. And I think, Terrell, it's one of those things where you don't know that you don't know, because probably if I didn't have that experience in sales, I would probably be in that boat as well. Because I mean, and this stems as far back as how marketing is taught in schools, right, at the tertiary level, where marketing is seen as something where once all you need to do is just raise brand awareness, right? Once you generate brand awareness, once you're getting visibility, then everything pretty much takes care of itself. But what a lot of marketers don't realize is that that way of approaching marketing is really very outdated. It was back in the day where, in the 1940s, when you think about when radio television ads first came about, the competition wasn't that much, and there weren't many channels per se to really market on. So all you really need to do is just, push your product out there in the form of a TV, radio, newsprint ad. And once people saw that, they'll be like, all right, this is the brand that we need to buy. But now we're at a stage where, because of the digital age and globalization, it's the barrier to entry in terms of starting a business is so low. Almost anyone can start a business today, so competition is super high. There are so many challenges. I mean, just in social media alone, you have LinkedIn, you have YouTube, you have Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, whatever you choose to market on. So there are so many channels. So it's no longer about just looking at marketing as brand awareness. No, you have to go to the next step of, how does our marketing actually drive business outcomes, business results? And I find that a lot of marketers haven't made that mindset shift as yet.
Gotcha. And I think that's interesting that you bring that up, because I mean, it's one of those areas where my background is accounting and finance. So it's like the marketing, the sales was so new to me that I found that every now and then, as I took that old philosophy of just, hey, just get brand awareness. And then when you
Yeah.
go to actually, activate the sales process, you start realizing, man, the brand that I built and the reputation doesn't match what I'm trying to sell. Do you notice that happening between, people who don't have a connected sales and marketing strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that is because of a disconnect between what marketing is saying and what the sales reps or sales professional within the company is saying. Because oftentimes what you have is marketing and sales operating in a silo. So marketing is over here doing their thing, sales is over here doing their thing. There's no collaboration, there's no alignment. So you'll have marketing probably speak something, or brand wise, or make some sort of brand promise, but then when the sales professional actually go and it doesn't match that marketing message and how the brand is actually positioned. And I know a lot of marketers may not want to hear this, but I believe the best messaging, the best positioning, first of all, comes from customers, and second of all, comes from your sales team, right? Because I mean, it's kind of like getting the words directly from the horse's mouth, if you want to use that saying, from a customer standpoint. But if you can't do that, then the next best thing is to listen to your sales team, because they're the ones who interact with customers on a daily basis. They're the ones that understand what are the challenges customers struggle with. If you're selling a product, for example, whether it's a SaaS product or just any product, they understand what features of a specific product or tool do customers mostly interact and engage with. or what specific need they have at this particular moment, because customer needs change over time. So I think where that is concerned, it's really important for marketers to really try to get that collaboration. Even if it's something that's difficult, obviously it may need a culture shift entirely, but at least try for that collaboration to happen. Because I can tell you from personal experience and working with clients, it makes the process so much better for everyone. For marketers, it allows marketers to really be able to justify and prove their value in terms of certain marketing activities. How does it drive revenue, business outcomes for the company? But then from the sales side, it really helps them, because as you mentioned, like you have sales reps who will go there, they're cold calling, they're doing cold outreach. And if that brand presence isn't already established, then it's going to have a lot of buyer friction on the sales, and it's going to really be difficult for those salespeople to get in touch with the people that they need to, in order to present that offering, and to try to put them in that pipeline to eventually lead to a customer.
Awesome. So you bring up a very, I think, interesting point, and I'm curious how you handle it yourself on, like I said, getting that feedback, whether it's, probably primary or best places directly from the customer. Can't get it from the customer, getting it from the sales team, and then allowing that insight to kind of inform your marketing strategy. Now, as you kind of branched out to build your own business, how has that journey been for you of getting that feedback and then working it backwards into your marketing strategy?
Yeah, I mean, to be completely honest, it's been a challenge, because it's different when you're a marketer working in a company where the only thing you need to focus and think about is just marketing, because the sales, the finance, HR, if you have team members or staff working with you, you're just very tunnel focused on your marketing, your role, what you need to get done. I found as an entrepreneur, it's difficult balancing everything, because on one end I have to do the marketing to really put the brand out there, to really position myself as I don't want to say the word expert, but as someone who can actually help clients, help customers with a particular need or challenge that they have. But at the same time, you have to kind of manage your time to do business development, to do outreach, and then I'm sure every sales rep can relate to this in terms of the following up, the pains of following up with a particular client or a client list, probably for weeks if not months, trying to get that meeting, or trying to close that deal, or trying to move it to the next step of the sales process. And doing that while trying to think about innovation, like how can I grow the company, how can I probably tap into new customer segments, or new markets, or new product offerings that weren't there before, but you realize there's a need now. So for me, it's been a challenge. The best thing I've been working on now is how can I balance both, where I'm executing marketing, but I'm doing it in such a way that it can also generate leads and business for me.
Gotcha. And I think that becomes a phenomenal thing about where we are in business, where you have, like I said, that flexibility where you can start to combine, or I guess you could say you can get dual benefit from it. Like I said, your marketing kind of feeds into kind of lead generation. So as you kind of narrow, kind of gone down that path, and what are some of the places that you tend to, like, get your marketing or get your messaging out that does kind of also help generate leads?
Yeah, I mean, the main channel for me is LinkedIn, and that's primarily because of my target customers, my target audience. They're mostly on LinkedIn. Like I can probably say 90% of the business I've gotten has been from LinkedIn, and that's just from me like putting content out there, positioning myself, as I mentioned, as someone who can help clients with a particular need or a particular challenge. One of the things I haven't started executing as yet, but I've been looking into, is also how can I use podcasts to also generate business, even as well as TikTok. But that's an entire conversation in of itself. but how can I use TikTok in a very strategic way, right? Because it's not just about jumping on a channel because it's the most popular channel right now, but how can you be strategic and intentional around that, where I can build that brand on TikTok and kind of feed that traffic, feed that audience back into, let's say, whether it's a training or a course that I'm offering, because that's something that we're exploring as well right now, or for people who want that service, to actually provide marketing execution for them, where I'm the one actually executing that strategy for them on their behalf.
You bring up an interesting point when you talked about TikTok, and one of the things that I find to be a ongoing exercise is, you run that opportunity of, you can get on a platform and you can do what's popular and get attention. But the question, like say, you didn't ask yourself is like, is this the type of attention that will generate leads, which will generate, particular clients? So I mean, I guess in your perspective, speaking of TikTok, a lot of people know TikTok for more of the comedy, the dancing, and have do you have any initial thoughts, or any thoughts at all about, how, professional organizations or people who provide a professional service, how TikTok can play somewhat of a role in their strategy?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm reiterating again because it's very important. It's about being strategic and intentional. So for my particular strategy, I'm not looking to do comedy because I don't consider myself someone who is comedic or funny. So I'm not even going to attempt that. The whole dancing aspect, that's pretty much being done by everyone. So the first thing is really what will make your brand unique and stand out. So it's a very delicate balance between what's unique about your brand and what will make it stand out, the creative element of it to really draw people's attention, as you said, but at the same time it's still in line with your brand and your values and what you actually stand for. So one of the things I would recommend is to first of all look on how can you, because TikTok is, unlike LinkedIn, it's like the complete reverse. LinkedIn, it's mostly, I would probably say 75%, if not 80%, educational, informational content. And then you probably have that 20% aspect of creativity. With TikTok is a complete opposite. It's the creativity first that will draw in that attention, and then how do you pull that attention and make it so that it's aligned with your brand and what you're trying to convey. So the best thing, and let me just speak from my experience because we're experimenting with it right now, is try to provide that educational content, but in a way that's entertaining and creative. So not from the comedic standpoint, but probably you have some music playing, and we give some like tips that people can use, from a content marketing standpoint, because that's where we really focus on. Probably some quick things that can do, some quick wins, and then from that, people will say, well, I was drawn in by the creativity, the entertaining aspect, but I also learned something, and now they can take that learning, they can implement for themselves, they can get results, but then it will now come back to them to say, wait, I actually executed this and it actually worked for me. What else does this person do? And you may end up having someone, or your audience, clicking on your website, going on your website to see what it is that you really do, that is of course in line. The content has to be in line with what you actually do. And from that they may end up booking a meeting. I mean, people will click on your website just out of curiosity, just to see what you do, and then assuming that your messaging, your positioning is on point, they'll reach out to you. Because I've had a lot of people who've done that, not necessarily from the TikTok aspect, but from LinkedIn, where they knew nothing about me, but I put out a piece of content, or I commented on something someone said on their post, and they click on my profile just out of curiosity. They read what I did and ended up clicking, whether sending me a message or clicking on a website to see what it is that I do. And they'll reach out to me to say, hey, I found your LinkedIn, I saw your post, but based on what I see on your website, I think you guys can actually help us with a particular marketing, well, not marketing challenge, but a particular challenge that we have that you guys may be able to help us with.
Awesome. So speaking of that, when when you're explaining to potential customers or just prospects, or when you think about, what are the problems that, you're solving for, your target audience, and who would your target audience be?
Yeah, I would say my primary target audience, not my only one, but my primary one would be B2B tech startups. Because of my prior experience working in that space, I have like inside knowledge of how it actually operates, how it works. So I think based on my knowledge and certain frameworks I've developed, it would best for those people. But B2B in general, really. But in terms of the challenges, they're numerous. I really try to niche, and certain things such as how do you use marketing to drive business outcomes, to drive revenue. That's something I realize is a major challenge for most marketers within companies. Is, as I mentioned before, they really know how to focus on the top of funnel, to drive that brand awareness, to drive that brand activation. Even in some cases know how to generate leads, but then how do you align it with sales so that your marketing execution really drives the entire sales process, the entire buyer's journey, and not just the aspect that you control, which is that brand awareness or brand activation element. So that's one thing. The other thing is, once they actually generate those leads, how can marketing now support sales to actually lead to a conversion? So it's not just, hey, we generate leads or pass it to sales, we don't need to think about it anymore, but it's how can marketing support along that journey, or to the end of that sales process. Something recently I've discovered is the training element, which is why we decided to branch out into that as well, where you'll find that people don't necessarily want someone to come in and actually execute. They just want someone who can really, I guess, give them a different perspective, kind of teach them something new, kind of help them to get results, faster, more efficiently, more effectively. And you may have that knowledge. So rather than them, trial and error, trying to figure it out for themselves, they'll bring us in, and what we offer is like a full day workshop where we'll actually meet with the marketing and sales team. We'll meet with the CEO if possible, if it's a startup, because in larger organizations it may be difficult to do that. And we kind of do an assessment with them to say, all right, where you guys are right now, what marketing activities are you currently doing, what does your sales process look like in terms of, let's say I'm someone you have never heard of your company or your brand before. How would you take someone like me from not knowing about your brand to actually becoming a paying customer or client? And have them walk me through that entire process. Walk me through what does their product offering look like. If they have multiple offerings, then which one is the most profitable, which one you find drives the most revenue for the company, or which one you find generates the most leads, or which channels do you find generate the most leads for the business. And taking all that information in, and now building out a very customized training workshop for that particular client. Another one as well is, how do you use content marketing in a way that, well, I guess it kind of filters into the first point I mentioned about driving results, but how do you use content marketing in a way that drives the entire funnel, and not just focusing on brand awareness or thought leadership, where most people really think about content marketing.
Yeah. Gotcha. There's a lot of amazing things there. So, if people are interested in finding you online, where should they look to find you?
Definitely LinkedIn. LinkedIn is where I am most of the time. Yeah, right there. So you just search for me, Winston A Henderson, and this will pop up. You can send me a message. I respond pretty quickly on LinkedIn, because that's where I spend most of my time.
Gotcha. Now, something I want to talk about is, some of the content that you're sharing. And I want to pull up some of it because, like I said, I was a guest on your podcast, and I think you have a lot of great conversations. So, can you tell us a little bit about, your podcast? What can people expect from your content?
Yeah. So the podcast is Revenue Alignment Podcast. Pretty sure you guys notice a theme here. I'm very big on themes. But the idea of how the podcast came about, it's really, I think it was 2019. I did market research where I live here in Jamaica, because I wanted data on what are the challenges that marketers struggle with. So I interviewed over 100 marketers, and one of the most surprising things to me from that research that I did was that 87% of marketers say that their number one challenge or hindrance to actually getting results is lack of budget. And when you ask them, well, what's your primary goal or focus, they say some sort of sales or revenue generation activity. But the problem was that there's a disconnect between what marketers say is their primary objective, which is that revenue generation activity, versus what they're actually doing. So when I came on LinkedIn, there was this whole talk around, well, never worked for a CEO who doesn't understand marketing. Um, and that whole thing about, marketers always pointing the finger at everyone else as to why people within the organization doesn't value marketing, whether it's the CEO, whether it's the sales manager, or whether it's someone in finance. And I took a step back and I looked and I remembered my experience when I transitioned from working as an employee to actually doing freelance. And I remember having a lot of conversations with CEOs, and their biggest thing was that they don't see the point or value marketing because it's always the fluff around marketing. So things like, as I mentioned, brand awareness, engagement or growing followers, which those things have their place in terms of KPIs and knowing what works and what doesn't. But for a CEO doesn't care about how many followers they're getting or how much people is engaging with a post. What they care about is how much money is being made and the ROI that's generated from all this money that they're spending on marketing. So I said to myself, you know what? Let me take a step back and let me kind of share or kind of create this environment, if you will, around the podcast where let's have conversations with people who for the most part aren't marketers. Let's get their point of view to say, well, why is it that they don't value marketing, and what can marketers actually do to get by, what I call develop their marketing, um I forgot the term that I use for it, but basically, how can they develop that buying and generate that level of value, in terms of how can they demonstrate and communicate that value to the organization, that marketing does have its place, but it's not so much from the standpoint of, well, we need to have that conversation to change their minds. It's more, hey, marketers, these are the people who control the budget. The CEO controls the budget. The finance people controls the budget. Whether you want to, whether we like it or not, sales has way more leverage within companies than marketers do, because sales brings in the money. So what if, instead of blaming them for why marketing isn't valued, why don't we look on what we can do, the things that we can control to actually change, and not just focusing on driving the top of the funnel, but how can our marketing be executed in a way that drives revenue, business outcome, business results for companies. And now we use that to build up our marketing capital. That's the word I was trying to remember. Our marketing capital within companies, so that we give them what they want, and in turn we'll get what we want, which is that increase in budget, which is that creative freedom to really execute the type of marketing that we really want to execute.
Nice, nice. And I think that those are so many opportunities that I've had in working in different corporations where that has been a big topic, where working with the marketing team says, "Hey, well, we want to do this, this, and this. Oh, that's not in budget." And even through 2020, where there are a lot of
Mhm.
companies that were looking to try to cut back on costs, and for many of them, the marketing budget was where they started. And so I probably a definitely great resource for marketers to be able to hear the perspectives of non-marketers so that they know how to kind of approach things to be more effective. So, I'm excited for people to check out that show, especially for marketers, and I think even for non-marketers as well. But before we wrap
Yeah.
up, one question that I love asking every guest that comes on is, when you think about your career and you think about where you've been, what's two pieces of advice that you would share with other business owners? And it can be something you've already shared that you want to reiterate, or it could be two new things.
Yeah. I have two new things. And I think this is probably the common enemy of everyone who starts out in entrepreneurship, being their own business owner. Is don't get too caught up with the fantasy of your idea. And what I mean by that, a lot of times first time entrepreneurs, I fall into this trap as well. You have an idea for a business. To you it sounds really great in your head. You may talk to a few friends and family and they're like, oh, that's one amazing idea, yeah, you should definitely do that. And you decide to launch this business without any real market research in terms of, is this a viable business? Can it be profitable? Does it actually address a need or a want that's in the market and people are willing to pay for it? But you get very stuck in your own head of thinking, well, this is my business idea, I think it's a great idea, so therefore everyone else will think it's a great idea as well and buy into what I'm doing. And we often get stuck where we're trying to fit a round peg into a square hole, and we are trying to force something to work. So I would say the first tip is being able to pivot from what you're doing and knowing when to. You don't necessarily have to change it completely. So, for example, Terrell, I know you're in the finance space. Maybe for you, you may have started out doing, consultancy for businesses, but then you may realize that, well, people want, probably training courses on finance and different aspects of finance and how they can better manage their finances to grow their business. What you probably find a lot of entrepreneurs do is being very stuck of, well, this is what I started out, this is what I want to do, so that I'm not going to offer that even though the market says it needs that. So first of all, being able to pivot from what you're doing. The second thing I would say is, and I know it sounds very cliche saying it, but I found it to be very true for myself in the last 6 to 12 months, is really doing something that brings you joy and fulfillment. Because I can tell you there are so many stresses that comes with being an entrepreneur, especially if you're a startup, especially if you're bootstrapping what you're doing and you don't necessarily have the resources or the bandwidth or the personnel to really help you build it from that growing stages or that founding stage. Is you have to find something that you are okay with waking up every single day and doing, where when you wake up you're excited to get started in your day and get it done, versus you wake up and you're like, oh, I have to do this thing again because I have an obligation to my customers or my clients. I mean, you really don't want to do it because it creates a lot of stress and anxiety for you, but you have to because of that obligation. So those are the two things I would definitely say is a big one for me.
Awesome. Well, Winston, it has been a pleasure having you on the show, man. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and sharing your wisdom and your insight. A pleasure to have you.
Pleasure being here, Tyrell, and thanks again for having me on.
Thank you for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like our content, be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want to see more of our exclusive content, you can subscribe and become a member on patreon.com/Business Talk Library. Hey, the Business Talk Library is the place where business makes sense.